Hello. So I remember this time around 5 years ago, probably 2021-ish, and I had just gotten home from work, and work was insane that year. It was like so busy and nobody to help. Nobody wanted to work, and it was just, oh my gosh, like mind-blowing crazy. And I was still really in the depths of my darkest days within the grief of losing my mom. I don't think I'd been to therapy yet. So it was just really an angry, sad, really stressed out to the max. And that's where I was mentally. And I came home from work and the TV was on. I'd put it on music. I think it was on CMT. And Patty Loveless was playing How Do I Say Goodbye? Whatever, if you know that song. How Do I Learn to Say Goodbye? And it like really hit me. And I was like having a moment, And my youngest was like trying to get my attention. So the way I remember it is I paused the TV like 3 or 4 times to, tend to him. And then every time I'd unpause it, he would need me, And he was probably like 4 or 5. So like young little guy. And finally it got to a point where I lost all of my stuff. I lost it all. I yelled, I screamed. I was already crying because of the song, and my day and the grief and the anger and the sadness. It was all welling up. And I just lost it. I lost it on him. And he went into his room and he cried. And I went in there and asked him, why are you crying? At this point in my parenting, yelling was normal for me. It was a form of communication that I thought was normal. And so whenever I asked him, why are you crying? He said, because when you yell, it hurts my ears, Mommy. And I will never forget that. And this was really the beginning of me knowing that something needed to change. And especially in regards to my parenting. Like that's where this whole thing all started for me, was I didn't want to yell at my kids anymore. And I wish I could say that I had that realization and then I stopped yelling at my kids and everything was great. But it didn't go that way at all. First came the awareness of, this isn't healthy. Maybe it is normal, okay? And that's fine, but it's not healthy and it doesn't sit well with me. Every time I did yell at my kids, it's because I lost control of myself. Have you ever felt that inside of you whenever they're like being loud or, things that kids do, like messy, and you like feel it inside of you, and then it gets to a point where you can't take it anymore, and that's when I would pop off, And so really becoming aware that I was doing it and that it's not the way that I want to be doing it. And then the next part, I think, is like the hardest and most stressful part of it all, because you know what you're doing. You know that you don't want to be doing it, and yet you still watch yourself do it. I can tell you, like, I have so many memories of times where they were in the back just being kids, and, I yell. Like, it does do the job. It gets them to be quiet or behave or whatever it is, but it does it because it scares them. And that's the question really I was asking myself at this time, was, Do I want my kids to be scared of me? You know, and I really don't. Like, I want them to respect me, but I don't want it to be from fear. So many other times I can remember, you know, yelling and then thinking about it, and it's like, well, what do I do instead, right? One of the things that comes in super handy for me in these situations is just, you know, if you can create a little bit of space in between that feeling inside of you and before you yell, you can tell yourself, like, this is not an emergency. Sometimes I like to sing or hum, like, this is not an emergency. And it kind of like, it takes it down. Because normally when these things are happening, like, okay, so if it's an emergency, your kid's running in the street and about to get hit by a car, that's a totally appropriate time to yell. You know, because it is a scary thing that they're dealing with. But like, you know, them spilling something, like if they spilled their bowl of cereal and the bowl broke and there's milk everywhere, like, you can go about it in a way that is like, okay, let's clean it up, you know, don't cry over spilled milk. Or you can totally lose your mind and it be a crazy, crazy experience. And then anytime they spill something from here on out, it's like, you know, like, it's a trauma. Like, how many times have I traumatized my kids? Goodness gracious. That is another thing that was really helpful for me to understand too, is that, like, you feel like the world's worst parent, mother, whatever. I always pictured myself as this mother who is like soft and nurturing and fun and exciting, and then whenever I looked at myself as a mother, it was very like hard and strict and like hot and cold and very little warmth, you know? And so, like, how did I get there? You know? How did I get to this? I mean, it was a more masculine energy that I was bringing. And it's because of the way we were raised. All of these triggers that come up in us come up because this stuff wouldn't have been okay when we were kids. Like, if we were having a tantrum in the store, for example, like, I have a story of having a tantrum in a store and my mom took me out and beat my butt. So I didn't ever do that again. But tantrums are normal. Like, not getting what you want and then being upset about it is a normal reaction. So, like, kids are gonna do that. Changing from taking them out and beating them for it, yelling. Whenever my kids were little, I flicked them in the forehead, and I feel really bad about that. But it's a little bit better than what happened to me. And it's just, we're all doing the best that we can, including our parents. That was what was normal then, you know? And that's the thing. Like, if you are aware that, like, if you call yourself a bad parent, you're probably not. That's the point I'm trying to make with all this. Like, to say that you're a failure as a mom or dad because you have outbursts, because you make mistakes, right? And I know that feeling so well. Like, it's so hard, you know? because you always are trying to get better. So you don't want to be like, oh, just because I think I'm a bad mom, I don't have any room to get better, you know? But the getting better part is like tedious, and it's ongoing. Like, I still sometimes yell at my kids, and then I like get curious about it, you know? It used to be, I don't know, 5-10 times a day, and now it's like once every couple weeks. So getting from the 5-10 times a day of having these things come up inside of you to only a few times every couple weeks it's a process. It doesn't just, you don't flip the switch and it's just different. So having grace with yourself and knowing that you want to do better and you're learning how to do better, you're trying to do better, acknowledging that it's happening and you want something different is the first step. And then you work towards that. You put the space in between the trigger and the reaction. Get curious. Why am I so triggered by this right now? You know, chances are there's a part of you that experienced something similar when you were a child and you felt anger, sadness, disappointment, fear, but you weren't allowed to feel that. So you tucked it away. And that's that trigger coming out when you see the kid doing it. That's like what you that's what you wanted to do, and that's why you want to hush it up. But really the magic is in letting that feeling be there and just letting it know that, hey, I'm here now. This is not an emergency. We do not need to freak out. You know, the kids having big emotions, and then we like double down. We're like, bigger emotions. And that creates more, you know, toxicity, frankly. One other really big thing in all of this is the repair aspect. So whenever I do lose my temper or have an anger outburst, I go inward and I get curious about it. And like, I figure out what it means for me. You know, why did this happen? What do I actually need to feel okay and safe in this moment? You know? And then I apologize to my kids. And I let them know, you know how sometimes, like, this is me apologizing to my kids. Like, you know how sometimes whenever you're feeling this way and sometimes you say things that you don't really mean, or you yell or scream or whatever. Well, mommy was having that same feeling, and I'm working on learning better ways to express it, because they see that. They see you learning and growing. They see you being accountable for yourself and your mistakes, and then they watch you like figure out different ways, and then they start, because kids watch you. They don't listen to what you say. You can tell them, do this, do that, do the other, but unless you're doing this, that, and the other, they're probably not going to do it because you're not doing it. So when you take accountability for your mistakes, whenever you've yelled at your kids and you didn't want to, it's so helpful for everybody, you know? And that repair is often like what we're missing still on the inside. It lets them know that, yeah, you're gonna make mistakes, and yeah, you're gonna mend them. It's not just gonna be open and, you know, you're in denial that you've done anything. That's the worst, right? That's like gaslighting. Basically, you're telling them that their experience is not valid. This is a tough one. It's so close to my heart. It's the reason that I started all of this, was because I did not want to be I wanted to be a better mom. I wanted to be a softer, more loving, like free-spirited, not so like, you know, you have to do this, you have to do that at this time, or else I'm gonna flip a lid, you know, like, but that was the kind of mom I was. And it was basically because it's a combination of like how I was raised, because I was raised pretty strict, and like that was great for me, but there were some things that, you know, could have been a little different. But either which way, I was raised really strict. And then there's like society, you know, like everybody has an opinion on what you need to do with your kids. And really, I had to flush all of it down the toilet. And there was this time period where I really just didn't even parent, because I knew I didn't want to do it this way, but I didn't yet know what the other way looked like. So I just kind of like was quiet, you know, because I didn't want to do any more damage than what, you know, I was already doing knowingly. I didn't want to continue doing the same damage that I knew I was doing. But when it's all said and done, we are all going to there's going to be damage. It's like one of the hardest things, I think, as a parent, is to know that you're going to hurt them at some point in some way. And I think that's true with anyone you love. Like, we hurt those who are closest to us. It wouldn't hurt as bad if they weren't close, you know? And so that's been like a major reason that I've gone on this journey, was because I realized that because I wasn't able to handle myself, it was like pouring out, bleeding out onto the people around me, my kids, my babies that I love so much and never, ever, ever want to hurt. But I was hurting them. And taking ownership of that, and like I say, I still mess up, you know? We're humans too. And I think the kids need to see that. Maybe one day when they're a mom, they won't be so dang hard on themselves because they watched you give yourself grace, forgive yourself for your mistakes, and apologize to them and learn and grow from it, you know? That is my hope. And that is all I have for today. Bye.